I never really intended to let the truth about my success slip out at Brittany's wedding. If I'm being honest, I wasn't planning to go at all. But when Mom Deborah called me the night before, her voice a mix of sternness and sentiment, I gave in. It's your sister's big day, Lauren. Just make an appearance, will you, and look decent for God's sake. So I showed up. Not flashy, not frumpy, just in a classic navy sheath dress that skimmed the knees, sensible heels that whispered elegance instead of screaming authority, and a composed smile that had taken me years to perfect. The Bellevue Regent Hotel was exactly what I imagined Brittany would pick an extravaganza dripping with excess. The chandeliers hanging from the high-arched ceilings looked like frozen waterfalls of crystal. The reception hall smelled like a florist's cooler, the scent of fresh roses mingling with the soft flicker of hundreds of candles. Waiters moved like dancers between the tables, balancing flutes of champagne with practiced ease. It was a performance one that suited Brittany perfectly. Image had always been her playground, and this wedding was her magnum opus. I kept to the edges of the ballroom near the towering marble columns, far from the golden glow of the spotlight she was so used to. That's how it always was in our family, me on the sidelines never missing a moment but always remaining unseen. From my quiet corner, I could hear the clinks of crystal and the high-pitched laughter that followed every well-rehearsed compliment tossed Brittany's way. She was the youngest VP in Ridgeway Global Solutions history, now proudly married to Chase Morgan, the suave and photogenic son of Ridgeway's CEO. She wore success like a designer gown, and the world applauded her for it. Then, as if summoned by radar for awkward moments, Mom appeared Deborah in a tightly tailored emerald green dress that probably cost more than my first business investment. "There you are," she said, her tone edged with disapproval. "Why are you lurking in the shadows? People have been asking about you." "I'm just soaking it all in," I replied, raising my champagne glass with practiced grace. Her eyes flicked up and down, taking in my outfit with a critical squint. "You look fine," she muttered, lips tight. "But honestly, Lauren, you could have worn something more polished. This isn't just a party, it's Brittany's wedding. It's important." I bit my tongue, letting the words I wanted to say dissolve behind another sip of bubbly. Just yesterday, I'd chaired a board meeting where I signed off on a strategic direction for a Fortune 500 merger, a meeting that would affect thousands of employees and millions of dollars. But to my family, I was just a mid-level consultant at some firm with a name no one could remember. That anonymity. It was intentional, at least it had been until tonight. Mom let out a dramatic sigh. Consulting's nice, but it's not what I'd call real success. Not like Brittany. VP at Ridgeway before she hit 30, and now marrying into one of the most powerful families in tech. That's what you call making it. I offered a mild, non-confrontational smile and touched the locket around my neck, the antique gold one Grandma Jane gave me when I was 23 and broke. The only person who ever truly saw what I was building. "Sure, Mom," I said softly. "That's one version of success." But she wasn't listening. She was already scanning the crowd for someone more important to impress, drifting back toward the spotlight where Brittany always lived. And I stayed in the wings a little longer because I knew something no one else did. Not Brittany, not Mom, not any of the guests sipping vintage rosé. The spotlight was about to move, and none of them, especially not Brittany, was ready for that shift. "Lauren." Brittany's voice rang across the ballroom like a bell. There she was, practically gliding toward me, all bridal sparkle and sharp smiles. Her champagne glass sparkled in one hand, her new husband Chase tethered proudly to her side like a designer accessory. Still skulking in the corners at parties, she teased her grin, biting just enough to sting. "Some things never change." Chase gave a low laugh, clearly entertained. "She told me you were still at that tiny shop. What was it again, Rainbow Strategies?" "Summit," I corrected smoothly, my voice even and unbothered. Brittany waved off the correction with a flick of her manicured fingers. "Right, Summit. That boutique operation, still hosting seminars for mom-and-pop businesses and doing freelance workshops, adorable." My fingers tightened slightly on the stem of my glass, but I kept my expression steady. "It keeps me busy." She leaned in, her voice dropping just enough for those within earshot to catch the shade. "You know, Mom and Dad were actually kind of worried about you. No ring, no real career. But hey, at least you're trying. Independence has its charm even if it doesn't pay the bills." Chase laughed again, louder this time. "She's a firecracker, though. Brittany always said you were the brainy one. Guess it didn't quite translate into success." The words sharp dismissive, laced with years of backhanded concern, barely registered. I'd heard this narrative my whole life. In high school, I was the overachiever, valedictorian, full scholarships, academic awards. Brittany, she coasted. But she had charisma. And in our world, charm often gets you further than brains, especially when charm is paired with the right introductions. Dad had pulled strings to get her a foot in the door at Ridgeway, and once inside, the path was lit and carpeted. She rose fast not because she was the best, but because everything was structured to make sure she'd look like she was. Me, I was told to be realistic, to aim lower. Ambition's nice, Lauren, but someone has to do the smaller jobs, they said. Not everyone can lead. That's what they used to say, year after year, dinner after dinner, with practiced condescension polished like silverware for display. Even now, beneath the golden chandeliers and the heady perfume of roses and champagne, Brittany was in full form, effortlessly radiant in her designer wedding gown, draped in status and superficial praise. The prodigy, the golden daughter, the one whose path had always been illuminated by others' torches. And me, I was still the quiet shadow at her heel, the invisible daughter present but perennially overlooked. She lifted her glass toward mine with a theatrical flourish, her smile too bright to be anything but venom wrapped in velvet. "Well, here's to you, sis," she sang, her tone sweet as honey laced with citrus. "May your little company bring you joy, if not profits." The corners of my mouth curved in reply, slow and measured. "Oh, it does," I said, the words floating from my lips like smoke, "more than you can imagine." Because of course what they didn't know, what none of them ever cared to learn, was everything. The hours passed like a surreal dream soaked in alcohol and artifice. The ballroom flooded in amber light, pulsed with the laughter of half-drunk executives and teetering socialites. Toasts echoed, cameras flashed, and the bride Brittany held court at the center like a modern-day empress basking in the manufactured glory of her curated life. And then, with a deliberate click of her glass against silver, she stepped forward onto the small platform near the band. The room, a cacophony just moments before, fell into a hush like the prelude to a symphony. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight." Brittany beamed, her voice gilded with triumph. "It means the world. And tonight's even more special because someone very important has joined us. Douglas Kane, CEO of Ridgeway Global Solutions." There was a ripple of polite applause, some mild surprise. "He never shows up to employee functions," Brittany added, with faux modesty, eyes wide and twinkling. "But then again, I guess I'm not just any employee." She descended the platform like Cleopatra returning from a throne, her every step dripping with smug satisfaction. As she passed me, she leaned in her whisper sharp enough to draw blood. "Douglas is here because he knows what I bring to Ridgeway. Some of us." She paused pointedly, "are actually making things happen." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because I knew exactly why Douglas Kane had come. For weeks, his office had been trying to schedule a sit-down with Summit's CEO. Calls, emails, proposal drafts, it had all piled up in my inbox like unopened gifts at a party. I'd held off deliberately. Let them wait. Let them want it more. He had no idea that the woman he was chasing, the one he believed held the keys to Ridgeway's future, stood before him now in navy silk, sipping champagne in the shadows of a wedding she never wanted to attend. Then, like the climax of a well-timed play, the ballroom doors swung open. The energy shifted in a blink, laughter curdled into silence, and heads turned like flowers to the sun. There he was. Douglas Kane, tall and silver-haired, the living portrait of corporate dominance. He walked with the calm assurance of a man unaccustomed to waiting his suit, immaculate, his eyes scanning. Brittany straightened immediately, tugging Chase by the arm like a schoolgirl summoning courage before a principal. Her breath hitched, her posture snapped into perfection. But Douglas didn't look at her. His gaze cut through the room, over the crowd, past the glitz and ceremony until it landed squarely on me. A flicker surprise, then clarity, then something close to admiration. He moved toward me without hesitation, brushing past Brittany and Chase as though they were merely decorative furniture. He extended his hand with the warmth of an old friend. "Ms. Carter," he said, his voice low but rich with meaning. "I didn't expect to see you here." The air froze. My family turned to stone. Mom's champagne glass hovered in midair, forgotten. Chase blinked between us like someone struggling with a foreign language. Brittany's smile, once painted with such confidence, quivered as if caught in a gust. I accepted the handshake, calm and composed. Douglas, I returned my voice like glass, smooth, cool, unyielding. Good to see you. His face broke into an easy smile, the kind reserved for equals. We've been trying to get on your calendar for weeks. If I'd known you were here, I might have brought the proposal straight to your table. The shift was seismic. I felt the atmosphere around us recalibrate in real time. Suddenly, this wasn't Brittany's wedding anymore. It was my stage, and every eye in the room had turned to face the woman they thought they knew, and now realized they didn't know at all. Brittany staggered a step. Her voice, when it came, sounded small. "Wait, you two know each other?" Douglas finally turned to her, blinking as though noticing her for the first time. "Ah, you must be the one from Ridgeway." She forced a smile, brittle and strained. "Yes. Brittany Carter, Lauren's younger sister." There was a beat of silence, and then with almost casual curiosity, he asked, "You didn't tell me your sister was the CEO of Summit Strategies." Brittany froze, confusion etched in every angle of her face. "I'm sorry? What?" Douglas's brow furrowed, genuinely puzzled. "You didn't know," he turned back to me, his voice dipping apologetically. "I assumed your family. I thought they knew." I took another sip of champagne, letting the pause bloom. "They knew I worked in consulting," I said, calm and deliberate. "But they never asked for more." The silence was deafening, deeper than any orchestral pause. Chase stammered, his voice cracking the stillness. "Wait, you run Summit Strategies?" I nodded. "Founder, CEO." Brittany's mouth hung open, words lost in transit. Mom's clutch slipped from her fingers with a soft thud, unnoticed. "You always said it was a small firm," she whispered, bewildered. "It was," I answered. 12 years ago, in a rented office over a laundromat in Brooklyn. Today, we consult for over half of the Fortune 500. Douglas nodded, affirming. "Her firm has been a major player for a while. We've been pushing for a meeting to discuss a merger. Ridgeway's position has weakened. Summit has exactly what we need." Brittany found her voice, but it cracked under pressure. "Merger. What merger?" I turned to face her fully, for the first time that night, meeting her eyes without hesitation. "Summit's been considering acquiring Ridgeway for months. No one told you?" "No," she choked. "No one said anything." I shrugged, soft but pointed. "Maybe because you never thought to ask. I've always just been your sister with the cute little job, remember?" Chase looked ghostly now. You're the one the board's been trying to reach?" My smile sharpened into something cold. "That's right." Brittany staggered back a step, as if the marble beneath her heels had buckled. Around us, whispers surged like waves. Guests stared openly. Phones were raised, screens glinting under the chandeliers. My parents stood frozen, their faces hollow. The golden child, the shining star of the Carter family, had been eclipsed by the very daughter they'd never truly seen. And the spotlight, after years of hovering elsewhere, was finally right where it belonged. A few minutes later, I found myself sequestered in a velvet-draped antechamber off the main ballroom, a room meant for bridal gowns, and whispered congratulations, now transformed into an impromptu tribunal. The thick curtains muted the noise from the celebration outside, enclosing us in a space too intimate for the tension it now held. Brittany Chase, our parents and I, 4 familiar faces, watching me now as though I were an interloper in my own family, a stranger who'd stepped out of a mirror and shattered the world they'd so carefully curated. "You couldn't wait, could you?" Brittany spat, the tremor in her voice betraying the cracks forming beneath her perfect facade. Her makeup still held, her gown remained unblemished, but her composure, always brittle beneath its gleam, was unraveling fast. "You just had to hijack my wedding." I met her gaze with calm stillness, my voice level and clear. "I didn't orchestrate this, Brittany. You invited Douglas Kane to flex your status. I just happened to be the person he's been trying to reach for weeks." Her eyes flared. "Don't twist this into something noble. You ambushed me." I turned, my eyes falling on the people who should have known me better than anyone. Mom, Dad, anything to say? They exchanged a look, an old, worn-out glance of complicity I'd seen my whole life. My father cleared his throat, his voice softer than usual, hesitant. "Lauren's sweetheart. You should have told us. We didn't know." "No," I said, voice edged with decades of unsaid truths. "You didn't ask. Not once. For years you never asked because you were too busy pouring every ounce of belief, every dollar, every whisper of pride into her." My mother's eyes welled the first sign of remorse or recognition. "We were trying to help her find her footing. She needed the support. And I didn't. I laughed, a low, incredulous sound that echoed off the velvet walls. I was working 80-hour weeks eating instant noodles, building something from the ground up while you co-signed her apartment lease, while you funneled money from my savings into her MBA tuition. My father stiffened his jaw, setting in guilt or defiance, perhaps both. We always meant to pay that back. But you never did, I said, voice sharper now. Because you didn't think I'd make it. You never thought I'd be more than a placeholder while Brittany shone. And now that I have, you're scrambling to revise history. Brittany crossed her arms tightly, her voice cold. So you think you're better than us now? No, I said, my voice soft as silk, sharp as ice. I always was. You just refused to see it. Chase, poor Chase, stood stiffly at her side, looking anywhere but at me, clearly wishing the floor would open up and swallow him whole. My mother took a small step toward me, as if distance could soften what stood between us. Lauren, we made mistakes. We were only trying to protect you. The business world. It's brutal, especially for women. And yet, I said, spreading my arms slightly, here I am, standing, thriving, running the company that's about to keep your beloved Ridgeway Global from bleeding out. The silence that followed was suffocating, the kind that presses into your chest and doesn't let go. Brittany sank slowly into a chair, her posture crumpling like wet parchment, her breath shallow, her eyes wide in disbelief. And for the first time in my life, I felt the weight lift. I wasn't diminished, overlooked, or hidden. I was undeniable. I wasn't the other daughter. I was the architect of the storm. Io anchi so. 2 weeks later, I stepped through the sliding glass doors of Ridgeway Global Solutions, no longer a guest at someone else's celebration, but a decision-maker arriving to reshape an institution. The boardroom was everything I'd expected, steel glass and understated menace. But today, it was mine. The morning light glinted off my black Armani suit armor, woven in luxury, every thread a reminder of where I had come from and what I had built. Gone was the navy dress, the practiced smile. In its place, authority, clarity, presence. The board members already assembled turned as I entered their conversations, falling into a tense murmur. Their expressions carried a cocktail of emotions, unease, curiosity, and that quiet dread people feel when they realize the old rules no longer apply. Douglas Kane stood at the head of the long obsidian table and gestured to the chair beside him. "Ms. Carter," he said, his nod respectful, "shall we begin?" I took my seat, opened my leather folio, and let my gaze sweep the room. Over the past several months, I began my voice firm, but poised. Summit Strategies has conducted a comprehensive review of Ridgeway's operations, its financials, leadership distribution, and internal inefficiencies. I paused, let the gravity settle in. Our findings are clear. Ridgeway has untapped potential. But potential has been smothered by a culture of familiarity, not merit. That changes today. A few board members exchanged glances. Some sat up straighter, others squirmed. In the new structure, continued roles will be reassigned based on performance, strategic thinking, and vision. No more nepotism. No more legacy positions. Beyond the glass walls, I saw them, my parents and Brittany, watching from the observation deck. Their faces were ghost-like, etched in tension. Brittany looked smaller than she ever had, no longer basking in borrowed light, but reduced to what she had earned on her own very little. She wasn't the golden girl anymore. She was an employee waiting to learn where she stood. As of next quarter, I declared, we will implement a full departmental reorganization. Redundant leadership roles will be eliminated. I said, each syllable deliberate, slicing cleanly through the tension in the boardroom like a scalpel. And those who've proven their worth through results, not relationships, will rise. Promotions will be earned, not inherited. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the distant hum of traffic from the streets below, as if the city itself had paused to listen. I let the weight of those words settle into the room, watching, as expressions shifted from indignation to reluctant recognition. They weren't here to be punished. I wasn't here for vengeance. But I was here to build something real, something enduring, and that meant burying the old guard's illusions, the belief that bloodlines trumped ability, that last names could substitute for contribution. We are not here to dismantle for the sake of destruction. I added, my tone softening just enough. We are here to create something better. And that begins by letting go of the myth that legacy is a credential. A long pause. Then one by one nods began to appear around the table, slow, uncertain at first, then resolute. The shift had begun. Douglas leaned toward me, his voice low and threaded with intrigue. "You're more ruthless than I imagined." I gave him a faint smile, serene but sharp. Not ruthless, I replied, just clear-eyed. He chuckled, but it held a tinge of reverence. And your sister? She'll receive an offer, I said without blinking. Entry-level sales. She's welcome to climb if she's willing to earn it. Through the glass panel behind us, I saw her, Brittany. Her gaze dropped the moment our eyes met. No longer towering in heels or wrapped in pride, she looked like someone who had just been woken from a dream they never realized was a lie. For the first time in this building, I wasn't the girl in the shadows, the one whose achievements were met with patronizing smiles. I wasn't even the challenger. I was the architect, and Ridgeway. It was the blueprint now resting in my hands. The next morning, new contracts were drafted and sent. One for Brittany, one for my father, whose advisory title had been little more than ceremonial, a nod to nostalgia over necessity, and one for my mother, who for years had confidently declared that I lacked the instincts my sister supposedly had in abundance. For 2 days there was silence. No calls, no emails, just absence, awkward, weighty, overdue. Then on the third day, Brittany walked into my office. Gone were the symbols she had once clung to like armor. The designer heels, the curated perfection, the untouchable smirk. In their place were soft ballet flats, a simple blouse, her hair pulled back into a loose, almost apologetic bun. She looked stripped of everything but herself, and for the first time she looked human. Did you mean it? She asked, her voice quiet but brittle. Entry level? Starting over. I nodded. That's how we do it here at Summit, I said gently but firmly. From the ground up. She hesitated, her throat working against something unsaid. I don't know if I'm cut out for that. Then don't, I told her, voice kind not cruel. You have a choice. Everyone does. She looked down, fingers trembling slightly, then raised her eyes again. And in them something flickered, not quite regret, not quite shame, but the seed of something more honest. I want to try, she whispered. I don't want a shortcut. I just want to be enough. On my own. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Later that week, my parents came too. No posturing, no rehearsed defenses, just presence. They sat across from me, not like parents to a daughter, but like people finally confronting the weight of all they'd missed. We were wrong, my mother said at last, her voice trembling. About so many things, but mostly about you. I didn't speak, didn't need to. I didn't offer them absolution, they hadn't asked for it. What I had sought for years was never forgiveness. It was truth. And now I had it. The rest I could live without. That night alone in my office, I opened the top drawer of my desk. Nestled inside was the small, time-worn locket my grandmother had given me over a decade ago, its gold dull but precious, the clasp slightly bent from years of use. I flicked it open, revealing the tiny note inside, the one she wrote when I was 23, broke doubting, teetering on the edge of surrender. Success isn't about who believes in you at the end. It's about who you believe in at the start yourself. She had believed in me quietly, fiercely when no one else had. And now the world did too. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory was that I'd never needed their belief to begin with. Outside the window, the city blinked beneath me, vast and alive. I stood arms crossed, looking out not just at the skyline, but at the journey. At every step, walked in silence, every humiliation swallowed whole, every moment spent building while others doubted. I wasn't the family disappointment. I wasn't the shadow. I was the storm they didn't see coming. And I had only just begun. If you've ever stood quiet while others dismissed you, especially those who were supposed to believe in you, first know this. Your silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes silence is strategy. Sometimes it's power. What would you have done in my place? What would you say to the version of you still fighting to be seen? Leave a comment, I want to hear your voice. And if this story stirred something in you, if it lit a flame or unburied a dream, like, share, and subscribe. More real stories await.